Thank you, Kayla. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Adler. I'm president of the Alturas Institute and adjunct professor of law at the University of Idaho. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's always a great joy to participate in these, in the national finals. And I congratulate you on your great achievement to withstand the adversity of our times and to make it here to We the People National Challenge. My colleagues will introduce themselves.
I'm Donald Rogers. I teach history at Central Connecticut State University. I've been involved with the We the People program for many years. It's a great program, and you should really be proud of your achievement to make the national finals, especially under our challenging circumstances. So we look forward to your comments.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dan Taubman. I'm a senior judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado. I echo Professor Rogers' comments, and we congratulate you on getting to participate in the National We the People's Challenge. I too have been involved with We the People for a long time, and I know we all look forward to hearing your presentation.
Will you please introduce yourselves and your teacher, and also tell us something that you've been doing before the virus interrupted our lives?
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Emerson Fleming. Outside of We the People, I played varsity basketball earlier this year, and I'm president of our school's National Honor Society. And next fall, I plan on attending the California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo to study mechanical engineering.
Hi, I am Claire Arcaris-Weiss. Outside of We the People, I started a composting program at a local middle school, and I plan on studying graphic design.
Hi, I'm Forrest Derr. Outside of We the People, I helped revitalize the Incline Speech and Debate team. I did musical theater, and next year I plan on going to Willamette to study biology, and we're here with our wonderful teacher, Mr. Hines.
Good, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to read the question that you'll be asked today and about which we'll ask you questions. We're dealing here with Unit 4, question number 3, and the question reads as follows. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution provides that state legislatures can determine the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives, yet gives Congress the power to make or alter such regulations. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a uniform election process? And then, what responsibility do state legislatures, state election officials, and citizens have in maintaining free and fair elections? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of the trustee and delegate theories of representation as they apply to congressional districts? Please proceed.
As Winston Churchill once stated, democracy is the worst form of government except for all those others. When considering a uniform election process, there are advantages, like limiting voter suppression, as well as disadvantages, like how rural voters lose out to federal legislation.
A uniform election process helps eliminate voter suppression by state governments. The Help America Vote Act of 2002 was passed to help maintain minimum election standards. The 15th, 19th, 24th, and 26th Amendments helped enfranchise groups that didn't otherwise have the right to vote.
Additionally, federal legislation can combat strict voter ID laws. In a study by University of San Diego professor Hajinal, Hispanic turnout is 7.1 percentage points lower, Asian Americans 5.4 points, and multiracial Americans 5.3 in states that have these laws. This harms election equity and even disenfranchises certain voter groups.
One disadvantage of a uniform election process is disregard for rural counties. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, the sheer size of some rural jurisdictions means transportation is an issue for voters to get to the polling place. A national election process may not be aware of regional interests and gloss over rural interests.
State legislatures have a constitutional role in determining the time, place, and manner of elections, outlined in Article 1, Section 4. As part of this duty, state legislatures ought to take measures that circumvent gerrymandering, such as creating independent redistricting commissions like those created in California Proposition 11.
Election officials, on the other hand, run the elections themselves. They have a duty to inform, direct, guide, and participate through fair election processes. According to a congressional research report, election administration duties can be described as policymaking, implementation, and funding.
Citizens have both an obligation to vote and to influence the way we vote. According to another congressional research report, voters have a say in election administration measures that are referred to the ballot by their state legislatures. When either voting through referendum or for a representative, voters should consider their policies that influence the way we vote.
In a representative democracy, those who vote on issues for their respective constituents are either trustees, those who have autonomy in their voting, or delegates, who are a mirror of their constituents' will.
One advantage of the trustee model is deliberation. As Madison wrote in Federalist 10, the effect of a republic is to enlarge and refine the public views. Trustees can take what the people want and refine it for the common good. However, the trustee model is designed to circumvent the people and may not always reflect public opinion.
The delegate model, on the other hand, reflects the will of the people more closely. As Madison wrote in Federalist 51, the powers of government should be drawn from the fountain of authority, the people. The people are the sovereign, and tyranny is only circumvented when the people have direct say.
On the other hand, a true delegate model can lead to mob rule. As Madison wrote in Federalist 10, democracies have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. The people, through mob rule and tyranny of the majority, can make choices that are detrimental to the common good.
As President Barack Obama once stated, there is no such thing as a vote that doesn't matter. Whether uniform, distributed, or somewhere in between, our electoral process is far from perfect. There remains inefficiency, inequality, and a disjointed status quo. Yet in spite of it all, the best thing that we can do is vote. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very nice presentation. We'll now offer some follow-up questions. If you think about some of the reasons, the concerns, the factors that motivated the framers to draft Article 1, Section 4, do you see any of those reasons or concerns or something similar manifested in our time that gives you concern about the intervention or refusal of Congress to regulate state elections?
Well, we live in the digital age, which means there's a pressing need for cybersecurity. What we see is that when we have a distributed method where the states determine their elections rather than a federal government, we see that it's a lot harder to intervene in 50 different elections rather than one uniform election.
Additionally, we see issues in regards to federalism. So, for example, states have voter ID laws that may target certain minority groups. For example, in North Dakota, they had voter ID laws that required specific identification and an address, which Native American people that lived on reservations do not have an address, and therefore they could not vote.
Professor Josephine Wolf from Tufts University actually outlines how, since there's no federal standard for election technology, that this is harmful in the general elections of every single state, because at a DEF CON hacker conference, there were several vulnerabilities found within every single different type of voting machine used across the elections in 2016.
Does Article 1, Section 4 empower Congress enough to deal with the problems that you've described? And does historical experience suggest that Congress will use that power effectively?
Well, it certainly empowers Congress. We can see, such as with the Civil Rights Act, that Congress has acted on their ability to regulate state elections. However, parts of the Civil Rights Act were overturned by the Supreme Court, and because of that, it's not necessarily Congress that's failing its Article 1, Section 4 duty, it's the other branches acting to limit its power.
Congress needs to have a larger role in creating uniform processes to deal with issues. We see big issues coming to play in cases such as Bush v. Gore, where there was issues the different states and different counties having different procedures in regards to counting votes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Shelby County v. Holder decision by the Supreme Court and what its impact has been?
So in Shelby County, the courts ruled that states have the right to determine their own voter ID laws. And this is very unconstitutional because the idea of equal protection under the 14th Amendment should protect all people, including minorities. And it's actually been found that 25% of African Americans do not have a government issued ID. So therefore they are unfairly targeted through this Shelby County decision.
Similarly, in Husted v. Philip Randolph Institute, we see that the Supreme Court allowed for purging of voter records in Ohio. Similarly, this disenfranchises groups because it makes the voting process a lot more difficult. It makes it a lot more difficult if you're regularly changing addresses.
Do you see in the coronavirus a foundation for perhaps more aggressive legislation by Congress to protect voters in the next election?
Definitely. We need Congress to step in and create a uniform system to ensure that we have a vote for this next election. And a really important way that we could do this would be by mail-in ballots. Oregon currently has a mail-in ballot system, and their voter turnout in the 2016 election was over 70%, which is way higher than the national, which was 55%.
Additionally, if Congress passes the SAFE Act, which would inevitably create methods and regulations on voting machines, this would help in the upcoming election because it would secure a free and fair election for all people, since there are vulnerabilities in these machines. And if we have to vote from home and using technology, then passing this act will help remedy that.
How large a role do the courts have in regulating state elections?
They have a pretty small role. If we look at the political question doctrine, courts have been very hesitant to get involved in matters of state legislatures. We also see that the Supreme Court needs to uphold institutional respect. If they get involved in situations where they feel like their power is overbearing on the sovereignty of states, then enforcing their decisions might not always go through.
A major threat to democracy that the courts should rule on is the idea of gerrymandering. Even though this is fundamentally a political issue, there are cases of racial profiling and targeting minority groups within gerrymandering. So therefore, the courts need to step in and protect these people under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Additionally, we see the courts ruling on cases of racial gerrymandering, such as in Reno v. Shaw, but they have lacked in partisan gerrymandering, which is something that they should address.
That's time.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very good presentation. Now we'll offer you a little feedback. I thought that your presentation was very impressive, and I appreciated your level of participation, your responsiveness to our question. I thought that you showed a real broad agreement at times and an ability to balance the agreement with the other side, which I think was a real strength. I appreciated your invocation of relevant case law. I think that your review of the debate on uniformity of national elections was really spot on. I also liked your reference to a number of historical figures, including Churchill, but your reference to scholars, to institutes, and to papers. I thought that was a real strength. I think that what stood out for me was your ability to grasp the implications of the coronavirus and link them to the ability of Congress to legislate, both in terms of ensuring election security, which, by the way, I think was a fine point of emphasis in your various answers, but also taking note of the implications of the virus for free and fair elections and perhaps tipping the scales against democracy. I liked your your recommendation of a national mail by ballot. I think that was a strength. Your invocation of the high turnout in Oregon. And overall, this was a very nice presentation. I think you exhibited a firm grasp of constitutional principles, case law, and your ability to reason was a real strength. So good job, and I wish you luck the rest of the way. My colleagues have feedback.
So our feedback is going to be very similar. So I thought you had a very impressive presentation. I thought you answered the different parts of the question very well. I thought your analysis of the trustee delegate issue was really superlative. I really did a very good job on that. I like your answer to the questions, although I in response to my question, which was two parts, to what extent does the Elections Clause empower Congress and how has Congress used that power? You had a good answer on the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, but I was hoping to hear a little bit more about the theory of the Elections Clause and how much power that it allocated to Congress, and maybe a little bit more discussion of the legislation that has been enacted. You mentioned the Help America Vote Act in your prepared remarks, but there's some other legislation you might have gone into that Congress has put into place to reflect upon what Congress has done. I did like your policy recommendations. I thought you had a really good feel for the political and crisis situation that we're in, and you've had some really sensible suggestions to make about what we should do about it.
Thank you.
I thought your opening statement was very good, like Professor Adler. I like your Winston Churchill quote. I like your reference to the 15th, 19th, 24th, and 26th amendments. I think that's important and puts the whole discussion of Article 1, Section 4 in perspective. I like Professor Rogers. I like your discussion of the trustee versus delegate theories. I was a little disappointed with your response to my question about Shelby. I don't think that it dealt with voter ID laws, but with the pre-clearance provisions of the Voter Rights Act. And so I think you might have mentioned that, and also some of the results of the Shelby decision, which were several, including the establishment of voter ID laws, the closing of polling places, and the diminution or reduction of early voting in some states as a result of the Supreme Court's decision. I was tremendously disappointed that when you mentioned the independent redistricting commissions and mail-in voting, that you didn't mention Colorado, because Colorado has both of those things. So no, I'm just kidding that because Colorado has those provisions. But those are, I'm glad seriously that you mentioned that both of those provisions. And one thing that I liked about your answers to our questions was your focus on technology and how that will impact what Congress does in dealing with implementing voting laws. And that's something that we really haven't heard from today, but I think that's a really important concept that will take increasing importance in the future. And so overall, I think that you did a very nice job, and I commend you on your presentation today.
Thank you.
I think that your performance today reflects the fact that you're well taught, and that's a credit to your teacher. Let's join in and a round of applause for our students and teacher, and wish you good luck the rest of the way.